So, Mr. Kamath, firstly, thanks very much for taking time out to chat with us. Now, the events that we've seen play out in the US, to some extent in Europe as well, what do you believe the collateral damage possibly to India could be on account of that?
I would guess very little, frankly. In our context, structurally, I think we are sound. So when you look at the banking sector, it is sound. If you look at the industry sector, also is sound. The reason cash flows are healthy, companies are not over-leveraged, they are holding cash. Enough for investment was done or was being done till a few months back in infrastructure. Things were keeping pace. The consumer was happy. So basically the structural situation in the country is all right. So the collateral damage that would have otherwise happened, for example, if we did not have a sound economy, if we were stretched, would have been significantly more. The damage, as I see, would be to those countries which are significantly export-oriented, particularly in terms of manufactured products, to the developed markets.
Sure, but the last time we had a crisis of this magnitude when Lehman Brothers collapsed, we had the government step in and extend a number of fiscal stops to industry. The cost of that, totaling to over 100,000 crores. This time around, God forbid, if we do see a crisis like that happen again, do you believe the central government has the wherewithal this time to come out and support industry?
I would believe the central government would find the wherewithal, but I don't think it will come to that at all, because if you look at the dimensions of the issue, we don't have a structural challenge in front of us, A. And B, from the last lesson, what was very clear is commodities and oil take a correction. And we are seeing that happen this time too. And given that one of the only problems that we are of a significant order was inflation in an economic context and consequent high interest rates, that should correct. Actually, it should, this crisis, as it has played out in the West, would in a way be, I would say, soothing to some aspects of pain that we had.
Sure, that's if you look at it a little differently. But the fact that it is that after the events of the weekend that we saw, we're seeing oil climb back once again because people are beginning to just view this as one credit event and that things actually could not be as bad as it is being made out to be. So to that extent, do you believe it's too early for the government and maybe even the RBI to start reworking inflation forecasts, to start reworking growth forecasts?
I think it's always correct to understand what is happening around you before taking the next step. And I'm sure that is what in a regulatory context or a policy context they would do. Having said that, there are significant differences from the events of last time. In terms of liquidity, for example, leading up to the problem of 2008-2009, we had tightened up so much that there was just no liquidity. So there are two parts to the solution that we saw at that point in time. A, easing of the liquidity that we had tightened up for a variety of reasons, and I don't want to go into those reasons, good or bad. But tightening had happened. Interest rates were at levels which the overnight rate was over 20%. So there was a situation which just cannot be compared to today. Today, I think the liquidity situation is much more comfortable, has been managed completely differently from the 2008 run-up that we had. So given that, that part of it is not required. The second part would have been consequent to a global challenge. Do you need to pump in liquidity to get things going as it were? Again, I think given the nick of growth that we had, we shouldn't have a problem on that either.
Sure. Now, again, all signs seem to point to personal consumption in the U.S. taking a hit. Do you believe that can potentially take the U.S. back into a second recession again?
My call on this is that the correction that was required in the minds of the people, really, that they need to do in their own savings habits and so on, that correction is on way or is already been done. I really don't see the U.S. individual consumer tightening up even more in the context of what he or she has seen happening around in the country. I don't think that will happen. But what will happen is growth will be modest. So we are talking of, say, 2.5% growth. And B, the U.S. will have to learn to deal with high unemployment levels, because that is not going to ease, I think, in the near term. No economist is calling that in the next 3 to 5 years we will see at 2.5% growth, unemployment coming to 6%. Nobody is taking that call. So the government will have to prepare itself to deal with the high inflation rates, high unemployment rates, and I'm sure by the by they will come to that conclusion.
Sure, but the core of the problem in the US is that unemployment is high. It's at above 9%. As a result of which there aren't the jobs that can, drive the consumption. So my question really was in that regard. So should we expect that consumption will slow and actually take the economy back possibly into recession?
I'll put it in context. 9.5% is there for the last 2 years now in terms of unemployment. And whatever adjustment is required to be made by an individual consumer, I think he has made that adjustment. And that the impact of that is seen in the savings rate going up from 3.5% to 5.5%, I understand, in the US. So I don't see incremental pain in terms of consumption going down being borne by the individual consumer. So hence, I don't think, I don't fear a double dip at this point in time, but one will need to wait and watch.
So you did mention that it is countries that are big exporters and largely exporters of manufactured goods that are going to be the worst hit should the problem compound. Now, but for India, about 15% of our exports go to the US, and while stepping back and looking at it from a larger GDP contribution point of view, while it isn't a lot, do you believe it has the potential of hurting sentiment if we do start beginning to see export orders getting cancelled, the cascading effect of that possibly on the economy?
Some amount of that happening we cannot rule out. It did happen in 2009, but it recovered thereafter. I would guess that we will see some amount of that happening. The good news in India is I believe that we are still in an expansion mode in terms of aspirations and demand for various things. And if interest rates cool down as a consequence of what has happened, if there is a slack, that slack I think can be taken up by the domestic marketplace.
So now corporate profitability we are seeing is coming under pressure for various reasons, the interest rates being one reason, high input costs having been one reason, the hope being that those input costs will now reduce. But do you believe that India is now suddenly being re-rated by foreign investors, that they are beginning to step away from India for that reason?
Actually, I would think the consequent of this crisis, if at all the pendulum was swinging that way, it is going to swing back in our favor. I don't think foreign investors were shying away for the reason that input costs are going up and or interest rates are going up, or indeed, let us say, wage rates are going up, for a very simple reason. I think foreign investors understand that when a country is disrupting its past economic growth rate, there will be 2 or 3 things that will come under pressure. A, clearly the wage rate will come under pressure, the exchange rate will come under pressure. And if globally there is I would say raw material price adjustment taking place, that will have to be factored in. They understand that, and all this will have to be factored into the product pricing. So I guess that's what is happening. As far as individual companies in India are concerned, at the last quarter the problem of profitability coming under pressure, you are right. It is a consequence of raw material costs going up and interest rates going up. But I believe that both will correct. And as long as we do not have a challenge on our overall growth, we would think that we will remain very attractive. The second part of what I was trying to explain was that what has happened abroad in the developed world, Europe and US in particular, I think in a way people will now assess where are the safe harbors. Now, we are not a safe harbor as far as currency is concerned, but we are probably, in their context, a fairly safe harbor in terms of investment through the equity markets, because the equity markets then are a proxy to what is happening in the economy. And if we believe that the economy is doing well and the investors believe it, I think slowly that realization will dawn, particularly after the events of last week.
So, but on a related note, there's talk that the Fed may be forced to push ahead with QE3. Now, if that were to happen, while it will mean good news for the equity markets, shouldn't we expect that commodity prices will once again go up, and that in turn can, add to the pressure that corporates are facing?
I think the Fed has realized what the earlier easings have done. And from, I do not know, maybe too early, yesterday's FOMC output and articulation of strategy. The strategy is to keep interest rates very low. And I don't think it necessarily means that they would then go to actually easing liquidity to such an extent that you have a recurrence of this. So I would wait and watch, but at this point in time, I would accept the policy that we'll keep interest rates low as what they will do.
Right, but in the same context, there still is a lot of concern among foreign investors about the high levels of inflation that we continue to see in India and the inability of the government to bring the fiscal deficit meaningfully under control. Would you say that these two factors are significantly playing on sentiment?
Oh, indeed. I think they are, but they will not be put in as long-term factors because if you look at foreign investors, these are people who have lived in countries and survived and thrived in countries where inflation has been in not double digits but triple digits. And they have learned to go through swings in a dramatic manner. So I don't think they will really be scared and stay away for that reason. I think there is an assessment being done from time to time, overall the macro picture, their comfort, their ease, and at times they feel that wait and watch, at times they feel a comeback. But if commodity prices were get into selectivity mode and interest rates start moving down, that certainly gives them a signal that the domestic marketplace probably will grow at an even faster rate, and they should come back strongly.